Ma'am, you can start. The session will be recorded from here on.
Good morning to one and all present this morning for this exciting and insightful webinar on turning engineers into civil servants. The number of engineers aspiring to join the civil services has multiplied in the last 10 years. The career line offers an opportunity to involve oneself in public service. There is diversity in the field one works, be it taxation, social welfare, rural development, corporate affairs, and so on. One learns a lot. Great scope for personality development, enormous source for self-satisfaction. Equally important, if not more, is that working for the country as a civil servant enhances one's self-esteem. The wide variety of jobs within the fold of civil services has relatively greater sphere of authority and power than any other services in India. The service encompasses all one can aspire for: prestige, job security, salary package, opportunity of foreign tour, job satisfaction, etc. It's a beautiful rainy day here in Mangalore today. I wish to extend a warm welcome to the esteemed speaker of the day, Mr. T P Sreenivasan, Mr. Igneshwaran, Head of the Department, Civil Engineering, Ms. Pranamaya, Assistant Professor from the Department of Civil Engineering, who is the coordinator of this event, Mr. Ragesh Raju, Assistant Professor from the Department of MCA, who's helping us host this session, and to all my dear participants. I am Sangeeta Farao, the Placement Officer, and I would be moderating this session for you. I would like to run through a quick brief introduction of our esteemed speaker for the day. Sir, at the outset, I feel very honored and privileged to read out your accolades. Mr. T P Sreenivasan is a former ambassador and a permanent representative of India to the United Nations, Vienna, and Governor for India of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Vienna, and ambassador to Austria and Slovenia for the year 2000 to 2004. Mr. Sreenivasan has served the Indian Foreign Service for long 37 years. His previous postings were as Deputy Chief of Mission, Ambassador Lag in the Embassy of India, Washington, from the year 1997 to 2000, High Commissioner of India to Kenya and Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations in Nairobi from the year 1995 to 1997, Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations, New York, from the year 92 to 95, and Ambassador to Fiji and 8 other South Pacific island states from 1986 to 1989. He is presently the Chairman of the Academic Council and Director of NSS Civil Service Academy and Director General Kerala International Center as an advisory to the Asianet and produces a weekly TV program on international issues entitled Videsha Vicharam. He also contributes articles regularly to the Indian and foreign publications, to name a few: Wall Street Journal, New York Times, The Hindu, The Times of India, etc. He is also a visiting professor for international relations and chair of the Center for Diaspora Studies of the Central University of Kerala, Kasaragod. Mr. Sreenivasan has nearly 20 years of experience in multilateral diplomacy and has represented India at a number of international conferences organized by the United Nations, the Commonwealth, and the Non-Aligned Movement. He has chaired also several UN committees. He is also a very keen golfer, other than his, experiences in terms of his professional work. This is his passion, I believe. And creditable academic, having stood first in the University of Kerala in BA English and MA English, and has won several distinctions during his deeds. He also has several prizes and awards to his credit. Sir, it is such an honor to have you as our guest speaker today to share your insightful experience on civil services. I hand over the session to you. Take it forward from here, sir. A warm welcome once again.
Thank you very much. Shall I begin?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you very much for that generous introduction. I thought that might become longer than my speech. Anyway, thank you Thank you for all that generous words. Well, I'm grateful that I've been invited to this webinar in this very prestigious institution. And I also found that you had given a lot of publicity to this webinar. So I have to somehow justify it. Well, I chose this subject myself of turning engineers into civil servants because of my experience of the last 10 years in preparing candidates for civil service. In fact, when I retired from the Foreign Service, my only plan was to come to Trivandrum and run a training program. Of course, I am doing various other things, but the training program has continued all these more than 10 or 14 years. So there is this question of changes in the civil service procedures compared to what it was in 1966 when I took the examination and passed in 1967 and joined the Indian Foreign Service. At that time, only in the first top 10 could get into the Foreign Service. It was very highly coveted. Now it is not so. Foreign Service is not as popular as it used to be during my time. Many other changes took place, and one of the things that happened because of two reasons. One, the age limit was increased, raised to 32. While when we took the examination, we had to take it between 21 and 23 and only 2 chances. Now you can do it 21 to 32 and you can have 5 chances. And also if you are in a reserve category, you can take even more. So it has become slightly liberal that way, but also it has become more difficult in some other ways, which I'll come to. But the most important change I noticed was, unlike in our time, professionals began to compete for this examination, particularly engineers and doctors. We used to say at that time that all the good students went to engineering and medicine, and it is the second grade ones which joined the civil services. That used to be a joke, because some of us did not want to go to professional courses. But it was in a way true, because the surest way of ensuring a career was to go for professional courses, because civil service examination was considered a gamble. So this change, this transformation of professionals coming in has changed many things. At the same time, it has raised some questions as to whether it is fair for these students who do engineering and medicine at the cost of the government to waste it and become glorified civil servants instead. And that debate is going on. But my challenge was to somehow make sure that the engineering students are able to compete with the arts and science students. So that is the point that I'm trying to elaborate today. But before I go to that, for the sake of those who are probably new to this experience of hearing about civil service training, I'll very quickly say what it is all about and how it is done. Last year, about 10 lakhs of people took what is called the preliminary examination. The preliminary examination is only an elimination exercise. That out of these 10 lakhs, they select about 15,000. So it is a very drastic cut. And only those 15,000 take what is called the mains examination. Mains examination is a huge written test, essay writing and so on. While the preliminary examination is simply multiple choice questions, which of course is not easy, but at the same time, you don't write essays, etc. It's just 1 day, 2 papers. When you come to the mains examination, there are 9 papers. There are general studies, 4 papers. There's an optional subject, 2 papers. There's an English essay, 1 paper. Then there is an English paper itself for language. Then there is also a vernacular paper. So it's all add up to about 9 papers. And 15,000 people take this examination. And out of which something like 3,000 to 5,000 are selected for what is called the personality test. You are invited to Delhi. Now even airfare is paid by the government. And I had to go by second-class train at my own cost. So how things have improved. Anyway, so you go to the interview and you are given about 30 to 45 minutes. to establish your credibility as an officer. You already established your credibility as a gifted student, knowledgeable, etc. And then you convince them that you have the personality to deal with crises. What is your judgment? What is your tactics? What are your tactfulness? All these are tested in about 45 minutes. And during our time, it was 1,500 marks for a foreign service and 1,000 marks for the IAS. But now it is only 275 marks for the personality test for all the services. So the examination is the same for all the services except for the forest service, and all others take the same examination. And there are about 23 or 24 categories of services available, starting from the IAS, which is the most popular, IPS, IFS. IFS used to be the most popular during my time. And then you have all the others, the income tax, the INDAS, railway service, finally up to Pondicherry police service. There are about 24 or 25. So depending on your marks and your choice, you get the service of your choice if your marks are high, or something else which you may not have originally thought of. This is the exercise. It is very tough examination in the sense that these 3 stages, anywhere you can fall apart, fall down. And if you do that, then you have to again start all over. Suppose you fail in the personality test, then you have to go back to the prelims, the preliminary test, and then come all the way. So each time you take the examination, you spend 1 year of your life. And people take it once, twice, third time, fourth time, up to 5 times. By then 5 years are lost. And also you become old, and therefore you lose service years. So ideally, you should do it in the first chance at the age of 21, which will give you, like I had, something like 37 to 38 years in the service. And also you can reach the very top of the grades. If you retire earlier, but because you join late, then you will lose that many years and you cannot reach the top positions. So this is something about the examination. Now let me tell you some facts. I was just looking at the statistics, and it surprised me, even though I knew this, that the largest number of candidates who go for the interview and do not make it, please mark my words, engineering students. It is the engineering students who go to the interview, and among those who lose the personality test after having done the written papers. Something like 60% of them are engineers. This is a problem that we have to address, which I'll do. And the second is that engineers and doctors fail in general knowledge. See, they are brilliant students, but they do not have the time to reorient themselves from the academic studies they had and the examination that the UPSC gives you. And so there is a disconnect there. And that disconnect also we have to address. Then this whole question of national waste. How come engineers and doctors on whom the government spends a lot of money? And that question is invariably asked to students, engineering students. Why are you wasting your time in the civil service? And that happens because many IIT graduates also now take the civil service examination. IIT, as you know, is very highly prized, highly valued. Even for immigration to the United States, the highest qualification is IIT. In fact, it is IITians who transformed in information technology in the United States. So if you have an IIT degree, you migrate to the US. And so we lose a good person. And because the value is so high. But the IIT graduates have a different kind of training, different kind of preoccupation. And they take a little time to reorient themselves to this examination. And that is another issue that we have to talk about. So to talk about those issues, we really need to know what are the qualifications that a civil service should have, or what is it that you are expected of you in the examination. First and foremost is proficiency in the English language. Please note, that is the most important thing even today. Even though you can take the entire examination in Hindi or in your mother tongue. You can take even the interview in your mother tongue or Hindi. All that is possible. But very few people do that. Some people do. And very few people who do that make it into the services. So these are also statistics. The reason for that is English provides you the resources, the educational resources that you do not get in your local languages or mother tongue. So what they normally do is they study everything in English, but if they have good command of the Malayalam language or Kannada or whatever, then they go and take the examination in that language, but remember everything in English, and then they deliver it. But if you prepare in English, you don't have to do these two exercises. And then interview, when somebody else translates your interview, it may not be as effective as what you are able to do in English. So for these reasons, most candidates take the examination in English. And therefore, the ability to read, write, and speak English is the first requirement. I don't know about Karnataka, but in Kerala, there is very little opportunity for college students or even civil service aspirants to speak English. Where do they speak English? At home you don't. In class you don't. The teachers sometimes don't. Then where are you going to pick up your English language? And that is a problem, particularly for the engineering students, because they don't focus very much on the language aspect. Similarly about doctors. You know the joke about doctors. Whatever they write, nobody can read, isn't it? Because there is this a joke about somebody getting a love letter from a doctor. And so she could not read it, therefore she took it to a pharmacist, thinking that the pharmacist can read. But then the pharmacist immediately brought 5 medicines and asked for money because he thought it was a prescription. So that is the pathetic nature of doctors' handwriting. So they have to suddenly quickly change it if they are going to take the civil service examination. So like that, a reorientation is necessary. That is number one. Then secondly, you must have broad interests. We all read newspapers, but how many of us read the newspapers thoroughly from beginning to end? They take the Hindu, starting from Hindu to printed and published by so-and-so. Nobody reads that. We generally look at everything, look at the nice pictures, look at headlines, then read, say, 3 or 4 stories of interest to you. And this is what all the engineering and medical students do during their whole education. And then suddenly they have to talk about Syria or talk about coronavirus or whatever is current subject. They have to be expert at. And where do they do that? Where do they have the time? An engineering student or a medical student does not have the time to read a newspaper thoroughly, for which you need at least 2 hours, because you need to read the op-ed page, the editorials, the topics of general interest, because nothing is outside the syllabus of the civil service exam. Anything and everything under the sun. And who on earth can know everything under the sun? But everything under the sun is available in the newspapers. If you read the Hindu, for example, starting from the most complicated political issues to spirituality or commerce or business, everything is in that newspaper. Everybody else also, other papers also have that. But Hindu organizes it slightly better, so I recommend Hindu as a compulsory reading for our students. So that is the second issue which we have to bear in mind. Then the third is global interest and time and ability to watch not only our own regional television, but also national television and, if possible, international television. In national television, I watch the most interesting one, which is very recent, called Vion, WION. Of course, all other channels are also good, like NDTV and so on. But Vion has the advantage of technology, and they are very up to date on everything under the sun, including international affairs. So I'm partial towards international affairs, so I watch that. So where do you find the time for that? Then general reading. It shocks me sometimes when a candidate who comes for the interview tells me that he has never read a book. It is possible. There are many people, engineers, doctors, even others, who have never read a book other than their textbooks. And this is something which is fatal for candidates, because that is what shows your general interest. At the age of 21 or 22 or 23, you do not have life experience that you need for this examination. Where do you get that life experience? That you don't get it from your textbook. But if you read a novel, even if it is a local novel, particularly a local novel, because that gives you the local scene, which you may not have otherwise. Or even comedies or any joke book, whatever you read, you get knowledge, information, which will come handy for you. So that is another requirement. Then off late, there is yet another thing that you can do, what are called TED Talks, TED-TALKS, TED Talks, and also TEDx Talks. I'm sure many of you must have seen or watched them. The great thing about TED Talks is they are delivered by the best authority on the subject. And they are invited to Los Angeles, where they record a talk in front of a selected audience for 18 minutes. So in 18 minutes, it's very well produced, very well delivered, and by the best experts. So one quick way of getting information and knowledge is to watch a TED Talk maybe every week. Where do you find the time for it? So it is basically an exercise in time management. So the first thing I would advise anyone at any level of preparation, I always say that it's never too early to start the preparation. The idea of joining the Foreign Service came to my mind at the age of 12, because my father happened to meet a gentleman who was selected to the Foreign Service after having got the first rank. He was a mathematician. And so my father was fascinated by his experience. And he told me that this is what you should try for. I had no idea what the Foreign Service was. I had no idea what to do. But it became a dream. And that is what you should have. Don't think about so many options. All that you must do before we start the preparation. And then focus on it. And stick to it as your dream. Even if you come across lots of difficulties, time constraints, all this you must persist. But don't be attracted by going for a bank examination or something else and lose your concentration. Of course, I did all those examinations because I was not sure whether I'll make the civil service. So it's good to do it because there is experience, but then don't go away with it. I was selected for all those, but I never went. I was hopeful that I could realize my dream as well. So take it in your head that you have taken this decision. The very fact that you're attending this webinar shows that you're interested. You could have done something else at this particular time. So that is a decision you take, and then stick to it, and then follow a timetable. And the first thing to do is to quickly calculate when you will be 21 years of age and a graduate. These are the only two conditions. And of course, 100 rupees for the men. The ladies don't even need the 100 rupees as a fee. No fee for the ladies. I don't know why. Anyway, so you have to be 21 and you have to be a graduate. Graduate in any subject. During my year in 1967, a veterinary surgeon joined the IAS for the first time. More recently, 2 or 3 years ago, a nurse, somebody who had a nursing graduation, got into the IAS. So it could be any graduation from any university recognized by the government and the UPSC. So you quickly calculate now which year you can take this exam. And then you start a countdown. Suppose you are already 21. Then there is no time for countdown. You have to immediately start. But if you are younger than that, Then you decide, you put on your wall that the examination in 2023 or 2024 and keep reminding you that you have only that many years to prepare for it. Forget about the additional chances. Your effort should be to do it in the first attempt itself. And therefore, you calculate and say, do I have now time to read general books? If there is, then select some books. Read some biographies of civil servants or ambassadors. Lots of ambassadors, all of them write books. I have also written several. So, autobiographies are very interesting because the experience in the service, that each one has a different experience. So it's good to share that. And then any novel, any book, depending on your taste and interest. And then decide on a favorite author or a favorite poet, because this is one question that you always get. And if you say, oh, I don't have a favorite author, or I can't think of a poet, immediately your chances go down. Because what they're looking for are rounded personalities, not bookworms. They would expect you to know everything about sports, for example. I mean, you may not play any sport, but it's always good to know. Select at least 2 or 3 sports. Tennis is very popular. Cricket is very popular. And if you want to be elitist, you can choose golf. You don't need to play all this, but you can learn the rules. It is complicated when it comes to golf, for example. And also you should know all the great players and what is India good at and what are the others doing. All this you should know. So don't skip the sports pages of the Hindu. Learn them, write them in your notebook. So to acquire all this, my strategy is today, if you have decided to take the civil service examination, buy a thick notebook, well bound notebook, not pieces of paper or slips or slip pads, etc. Buy a solid notebook like a ledger or something. And then write in it each day what you learn. Different categories. International relations. What did you learn today? What is China up to on our borders? What is the situation as of 31st of July? You must put it down in your book. If there is something else in today's newspapers, interesting, which will last the next couple of years, put them down. So one section should be international relations. Another section should be national news. Another section should be state news. Remember, in this examination, there's a lot of emphasis on states, different states, because our country is like a multiplication of states, of countries, nationalities. So they're all different languages, different strategies, different development stages, etc. So, and since it's a federal structure, whatever happens in one part of the world affects others. They say about Kerala that what Kerala thinks today, the rest of India thinks tomorrow. I hope not, because we do a lot of bad things in Kerala, and I hope the other states don't imitate us. But anyway, you have to know what is happening in your state. What are the crucial issues? So if you are in Kerala, the crucial issue today is the gold smuggling, even bigger than COVID-19, because people are forgetting COVID-19, chasing some honey traps and various other accusations in this. I'm sure Karnataka will have some other story. Rajasthan will have yet another story. But all these can happen, and particularly these are interesting. Then the interview stages, the first question they'll ask probably is, do you know Swapna Suresh or some such thing? And if you don't follow the story, you won't know who this lady is. So that kind of knowledge about your states you need. And the fourth is sports, very important. Collect all the information. You can't collect all the information on all sports. But the popular sports like cricket and tennis at least, you should know who the national champion is, who the Indian champion is, and what are our gold medals. Not many gold medals, so it's very easy. All these. And in addition, everything that you learned that day new must go into this book. It may be a new word, it may be a new phrase, it may be a new idiom, it may be a new idea. Just scribble it. What I do even now is when I read a newspaper, I have a pencil and a book, the same good old notebooks. I have now thousands of them. And keep writing whatever you read. Because if you think that you already committed it to memory, that's not true. It might, you might forget the next day. You will say, oh, what was the name of that state? So put it down so that turn your pages around if you are in doubt. So these are all the things that generally people should do, whether you are engineers or otherwise. And coming specifically to the problems of engineers. First thing, let me talk about the optional subjects. You have to choose one optional subject which you have to study thoroughly. And that is in 2 papers. And you can select any subject under the sun. But the interesting thing to do or important thing to do is try to select a subject which you studied in class. Take my own example. I did an English MA, so it was very easy for me to think what my optional subject would be. But then in my time, we had to have 3 optional subjects. So we had to study addition to English, for which I didn't have to spend much time. I had to do 2 more papers. One was British history and the other was Indian history, which I read myself in about 6 months and prepared for it. I didn't do too well in those subjects, but still I managed. So if you're an engineer or a doctor, try to take the same subject for your optional subject. Most students shy away from it. They say, oh, engineering is too vast a subject. And that is the kind of advice you will get from very many instructors. They say medicine keeps changing every day. And therefore, if you take medicine, the medicine that you studied may not be enough for you. And similarly about engineering. Therefore, what happens is you forget your engineering and your medicine and you prepare for public administration, sociology, geography, etc. The idea is that if you do these things, then you get higher grades. This is the kind of advice you'll get. Say psychology. The syllabus is very short. And the funny thing was, there used to be Pali. I don't know whether you know what Pali is. Pali is a form of Sanskrit, which is never used these days. It is used only for, the sculptures of, the days of Ashoka, and so on. And it is virtually not a live language at all. But many people opted for Pali because the textbook was only 25 pages. So it was very popular, but that's now been removed, thankfully. So it's my suggestion is that you should be confident enough and courageous enough to do engineering or medicine rather than shy away from it. But if you are afraid that will not reach you, because what is important is scoring, not only knowledge. And therefore you can choose whatever you want. But what I'm trying to stress is don't forget your engineering or don't forget your medicine just because you have taken another optional subject. Because I have seen these ridiculous situations when engineering degree holders, even MTech with degree holders, when they come to the interview, when I ask him or another member of the board asks him a simple engineering question, he has forgotten it already. An electronic engineer is asked what is the difference between electricity and current. He doesn't know. If you ask simple questions about structural engineering to an engineer, he doesn't know. So please remember that the fact that you are an engineer should not be forgotten. And that will also be important when you get into the civil service also. There are advantages. You might be put in charge of the PWD when you know everything there. So ideally, you should take your own subject as the optional paper. But if you are frightened by it, then take anything else. And if you still have not gone to graduation yet, you should think now, when you go for graduation, what subject I should choose for my optional paper. This is an important point that I'd like to stress. So whichever optional paper you take, you should have deep knowledge in that. And that is very important also. So coming back to engineering students, the second point, which I mentioned even earlier, was the capability in English. This also I find it rather rare. That is why I said engineering graduates who go for the interview, many of them don't get it because of their language problem. So please, engineering students, stress on language because your language is likely to be weak. Unless, of course, you have studied in another country or another state, you may have had a chance to speak English. But now there are so many opportunities to improve your English. You know, there are several coaching classes and English lessons and so on which you can take. So English, and then broad knowledge, reading everything. Because the technical students have no time when they are doing their technical studies. This I know. And so you need to do more reading than the other students who had the opportunity to do some reading or go and see a movie or read a novel, etc. And that you have missed, and therefore you should take more time in reading and expanding your knowledge. And also, you can do civil service preparation on your own. But if you are an engineer or a doctor, I would suggest that you go to a training program or what is called a coaching class. Because you need guidance, more guidance than other students. Of course, you can pick up textbooks, and now the internet has everything, all answers and questions, and you don't even need to go to a library. But you need to focus more on learning things from a training institute. This is not because I'm running a training institute, but you need a guidance. You know, you can go to the forest and see the forest without a guide. Possible, right? You just walk here and there, you'll find some trees, but you may not find the right trees. And in the meantime, you may also face a tiger, and all that you have studied will be wasted if the tiger eats you up. So it is better to have a guide who will show you the way. He knows where the tigers are. He knows where the snakes are. He knows where the flowering trees are. Then you get a better view of the tree, of the forest, than you would get otherwise. So I would suggest that at least for a year, you must attend a training program which will be useful to you. Then, when you eventually make it to the civil service, I'm skipping a lot because we can cover that in the question and answer time, is the first question that you'll always get on your interview is, why are you leaving engineering? Particularly, you are an IIT graduate and you have a job in Infosys or somewhere else, and then you are suddenly skipping it all and going to civil service. So what is the right answer? The standard answer is, I want to serve the nation. That is the most stupid answer you can think of. Do you serve the nation only as a civil servant? What do you mean by it? Then you will not know what to say. Because you say the sweeper serves the nation, the peon serves the nation. So why are you insisting on joining the civil service to serve the nation? And then you have spent nation's money on your engineering education. So what are you doing all this? And this is a question for which you must have an answer. And that answer can be different for different people. But the ideal answer is that the civil service is the top service of the country. That is where young people have great opportunities. Just because I have done engineering, I do not want to miss that chance of joining the top service of the country. Isn't it simple? Who can dispute about that? So, similar. I'm sure you can all think of other things. But have this ready as an answer, because this will definitely be asked. They will also argue with you that, you're actually wasting national resources and so on. And therefore, and they might say, what is it as an engineer you can contribute to civil service? Then suppose you say, I can become a PWD secretary, they will say, sorry, that job is not available. You will be in fisheries. What are you going to do then? Because it's a generalist profession. So you cannot say that as an engineer I have any special aptitude or taste or knowledge which entitles me to become a civil servant. So have those answers ready when you go. And also, normally they would ask you, say something about yourself. So don't be shocked by that. And so prepare yourself what you will say if you are asked to say something yourself. I find candidates simply saying, my father's name is so-and-so, my mother's name is so-and-so, I'm from this village. 3 minutes gone. This is of no relevance to them. What you need to do is to highlight your qualifications, highlight your accomplishments. In 21 years, 22 years, you have done many things creditable. You may not have done uncreditable things, but don't mention it. But a gold medal you got, or a prize you got in a essay competition, or a scholarship you got in the class 12. All these are very important information. And that may be in your biodata, but nobody reads biodata. So you need to sell yourself, you have to market yourself to the board. So that is where, a design that you made for a bridge when you are an engineering student should be highlighted. So don't waste your time telling them about the geography of your town or but the other things you can do is anything extra that you have done, any travel that you have done. Have you seen the world? That's very, very important. And what other family circumstances you have. Suppose your father was an IFS officer or a civil service officer. Mention it, because people believe in dynasty even now. They'll say, oh, this guy, he comes from an IAS family, maybe. These prejudices are there. But if you have that, why not highlight it? So, the first, your self-description. Secondly, your reason to move from engineering or medicine to the civil service. And then your broad knowledge of other subjects. All these you should be able to put across to them in the 35 or 40 minutes you get. And also they'll ask questions, you have to answer the questions. Not you cannot by yourself, but you can guide them in a way. You mentioned something. For God's sake, don't mention something you don't know. Suppose you talk about corona vaccine or something casually. You're talking about corona and you say, oh, the vaccine is coming and so we may be liberated from corona. And then suppose he starts questions about vaccine. Which vaccine are you talking about? What is its capacity? How many millions can we produce? Where is it being done? What are the risks? What are the advantages? All this you should know. So, but if you have not made the question, mentioned the word vaccine, you could have avoided all these questions. But if you are a vaccine expert, make sure you mention it. If you are a Shakespearean expert, mention Shakespeare, even if there is no opportunity. Or Winston Churchill, or world history, or anything like that. So that way you can guide them in the direction in which they want them to go. Suppose they ask you all questions, the first 4 questions you don't know. There is no harm in that. Even if you don't know a subject, they will ask you another question. But your morale will be gone by the time the 3rd question you say, I don't know, sir. I have an example of a very illustrious civil servant who told me he could not answer the first 5 questions, all asked by Mr. KPS Menon on foreign affairs. And he said, my chances are gone. All the 5 questions he said he did not know. But then he said, now that I'm not going to get this, let me be more brave. And so all the next questions he answered. He may not have known it correctly, but still he answered. And he joined the service, he was selected. So it's not a matter of what you know, but what you project and what you market in yourself is what determines the value of the interview. So these are some general things that I wanted to say. Maybe I can stop here, it's almost an hour, and then we can look for questions written or spoken or whatever. Okay, is that acceptable?
Yes, sir, I think that should be good. We already have some questions in the chat box there. Probably we can look at some and then we can move on from there. So the
So that will be better
participants.
because they will get answers to what they want to know, not what I want to tell them. So,
All right. Yeah, that's good.
yeah.
Sure. So participants, please post your questions in the Q&A section there, so we can take it up one by one, and sir would answer those. Sir, there's one
No, I
question.
don't see any on my screen. How do I get it?
You can see it in the chat box, sir, but I will read out the question to you, no problem.
I don't know where the chat box is. Below this? I've never used it.
Right. I'll read out the question to you, sir, no problem.
Yeah, better.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the student is asking, what about history of backlogs? When you appear a civil service, you need to be a complete graduate, or if you have history of backlogs, can you still appear?
Yes, if you are in the final year and your results are likely to appear before the interview or before the results are announced, you can take the examination. I think they take the year as August. If in August you are 21 and a graduate, then you can take. But if the results are coming up, say in March, you can still take the examination. Is that what you wanted to know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The second question is, as a parent, how to encourage a 13-year-old kid who's interested in civil services? The question to ask is, how do we plan their 24 hours a day? So how does a day
Well,
get planned for them?
nobody does 24 hours a day studies anyway. But when a child is interested, as I said, I was interested at the age of 12. I did nothing about it. I simply started talking about it. And talking about it gave opportunity for my parents or others, friends, etc., to either discourage you to or encourage you. Some people will say, oh, my horrible thing, you are going to spend all your youth preparing for this examination. Is it worth it? You're already an engineer, you're already a doctor. This kind of lecture you will get. So then you will have to find the answers for that. And while processing those answers, you will get to know more. And I outlined some of the things that we must start, what I call the first steps. So those who have noted down can use them. Basically, the truth of the matter is that you should know everything. Shakespeare, for example, I offered English literature. And all the 36 plays and his sonnets, you are supposed to know. But how many knows that? I didn't know. I had not read half of the Shakespearean plays. So I used to have nightmares that what happens if all the questions come from the 12 plays which I had not read. But it doesn't go like that. They take more or less known and familiar topics. Their idea is not to defeat you, but to find out the best in you. So if you have read at least 4 or 5 Shakespeare, they think that will be sufficient, so they will answer question paper will be in such a way that with the better known plays or the better known writings of the authors will come into play. So if you are offering Malayalam literature, for example, if you read N.T. Vasudevan Nair and Madhavikutty. So the well-known writers, if you read, that is good enough. You do not need to read everything. The syllabus that's prescribed also. So like that, the idea is that your eyes and ears should be open. That is what you should encourage them to do. See anything. See, when I was preparing for the examination, we had only one newspaper which used to be delivered in the evening, which we had to study the whole night. But nothing else. If you are reading the Hindu, that's all that you read. But the one way I found out was when you buy vegetables, those are packed in old newspapers. It used to be, now we are going back to that. In between, we changed it to plastic. Now, fortunately, we still have old newspapers being packed, vegetables being packed in it. Open it out and read. It may be from the year 1962. But then you know that if the war in China, the China-India war took place in 1962, it will be very curious to know what happened in the newspapers those days. So instill into young people the need to have very broad understanding of issues and very broadly, not necessarily deep. Deep, of course, is welcome, but broad rather than deep. Okay?
Sir,
Is there
one
another
more question. There are 3 questions asked by one person. The best optional subject to take mains and why?
Well, it
Second,
depends. Yeah.
yes, sir.
It depends on your background.
Okay.
Ideally, if you can take a subject which you have studied in your BA and MA, that reminds me of one point which I missed out. The examination is at the end. You don't have to be to hold a master's degree to take the examination, but your knowledge has to be master's level. During my time, nobody used to take this examination before master's. I never thought of taking the examination soon after my BA. But these days, people take it after BA, and instead of going to the master's course, they go and spend 2 years in a training program. Because the risk there is if you don't do master's and if you do only a training program and you don't qualify, and then those 2 years are wasted. And therefore, it may be better to do a master's degree. So, whatever degree that you take, if you are able to choose your own academic subject, it will be easier for you. So that is one advice. But the usual advice you get is that there are some subjects in which you are supposed to score high, like mathematics. If you are a mathematician, you can certainly get 100 marks, sometimes more than 100 out of 100. But in English literature, you cannot get that. Anyway, now I can see the chat box, so I can go to that also. Anyway, so optional subject, you must strike a balance between what you already studied and what are called the high scoring subjects. These days, the high scoring subjects are your mother tongue, if you are interested in mother tongue literature. Then geography is supposed to be like mathematics, you get more marks. Public administration, sociology, and these are useful also for civil service. But people run away from economics, I don't know why. People run away from international affairs, I don't know why. But these are all because of the impression that these are tough. So you have to make your own choice, and if you have a guide, he will also guide you how to go about it. And somebody asked why only Hindu or any other newspaper. Of course, any other newspaper. Any newspaper is good enough. But I talk about Hindu because they have an angle. I write for the Hindu. I write op-eds for the Hindu, and I know that they have an orientation towards civil service candidates. So their op-ed articles, etc., are designed for them. And when I wrote a book on diplomacy, the paper which gave it the most highest importance was the Hindu. And they said this is like a textbook for civil service. And so they have that orientation. Others also are now developing it. But Times of India or Indian Express or any other newspaper will do as good. Okay, I don't see any other question here.
Second question is the books to refer for the prelims and mains.
Yeah.
What kind of books?
Well, prelims, I told you, is the choice questions, the multiple choice questions, and 2 papers. 1 papers is what we normally call general knowledge. They ask you a question, and they give you 4 answers. The danger is all 4 answers look right, but only 1 answer is right. So you have to choose that answer. And there's a double danger here, because if you guess and choose an answer, and if it happens to be wrong, you lose marks. 1/3 of a mark you will lose every time you make a mistake. So if you have 50 right answers and 50 wrong answers, then you will get at least 20 marks will be deducted out of your first 50. So it's better not to answer if you are not sure. Because your temptation is why not guess. But if you guess, you may be wrong and you may get less marks. The second paper is more technical. It also, There is a little bit of mathematics there. I have never taken that paper, so I have no experience of it. But it is more technical. There is a comprehension in English language, etc. But that paper is only for qualifying. That paper marks are not added. So the second paper is not as important as the first paper. But anyway, you have to get at least 50% of the total marks in order to qualify for prelims. And the mains, I told you, there are 9 papers, including optional papers, and a limited number of people take that examination. So you have better chances. Once you are qualified for mains examination, and if you prepare diligently and well, there are greater chances of predictability. When you finish a paper, you will know whether you will make it or not. And that is the advantage of the mains paper. And there is an essay which can be on any subject. It can be factual subjects, or it can be subjects which needs imagination. Suppose if they ask you to write about India's nuclear policy, it's a factual paper. And if you know nuclear policy, you should write that. But there may be another subject. Honesty is the best policy. Something like that. And then you don't need to know much. You can, go on writing. It's on the matter of principle. So you have to choose. If you see a subject which you are thoroughly knowledgeable about, it is better to choose that rather than this imaginary or what's called thinking paper. Because there you may write things which the examiner may not like, and there is a risk there. So that choice you have to make. Otherwise, mains examination is quite predictable.
Sir, one more question. Will the interview round judge me based on my knowledge about everything, or my skills or co-curricular activities?
Well, mostly they start with your own experience. After they ask you to tell them something about yourself, then after that, normally questions come from your subject. In my case, most of the questions that came first were on literature. So that is an advantage. Because you are familiar with the subject, so you'll be more comfortable. Because as you know, when you go for the interview, you are very nervous, particularly if you are going for the first time. So what you need to do is to be prepared with your own subjects. And then after that, they'll go on to others. It depends on the board. You do not even know who is on the board before you attend there. Even if you go there, you may not know who they are. But they're all very senior, mostly retired people who are experts in their own subjects. There may be a foreign service officer, there may be an intelligence officer, there may be a psychologist, there may be, of course, civil servants, members of the UPSC, all this. So they don't ask questions from a prepared list. They look at you and they conjure up questions which may cause you difficulties, which may not cause difficulties. But since the interview marks are only 275 out of about 2000, that is not very determining factor anymore. Of course, it is important. So you should get at least 60 to 70% for the interview to qualify. But it is not as significant as it used to be during my time, when it was 1500 marks for the foreign service. So it is slightly easier to do that. So interview is a gamble in a sense, because it is possible that you may not get any question, which but it is mostly opinions, judgments, your views, etc., and not necessarily information. And therefore, anyone can manage almost all the questions.
There are a few more questions, sir.
Yes, go ahead. You have time.
Sir, regarding sports questions, will the questions be related to recent news, match, or from the past legendary players and all? Will there be any sports question?
Can be anything. Most possibly, it will be what's happening that particular day. Suppose you are going there to play a Wimbledon tournament, for example. Almost all questions are likely to be on that. But if there is no such dramatic, they mostly ask questions about personalities. Okay, so of course, Sachin Tendulkar is too obvious a question, but not so obvious. They'll ask you names of cricketers, rules of the game, records. When did India win the World Cup? Is it likely to win in the future? What kind of captains did we have? Anything. And if there is a cricket enthusiast on the board, you had it. So what happens is, when you fill in the final form before the interview, they ask you for your hobbies. Okay? Be very careful what you write there. Suppose you write there cricket because you watch cricket. You are trapped, because they are not interested only watching cricket. They should know everything about cricket when you say that is your hobby. And be very specific. Don't just write thinking that you know about Mohammad Rafi. The question may be about Beethoven. You may not know anything about Western music. So say very clearly Indian film music or Hindi film music or ghazals or whatever. So hobby should be very specific. And don't write reading as a hobby. It's not a hobby. It is a necessity. So if you are a stamp collector, such hobbies are also do exist. And those would be very interesting for them. Somebody recently said that her interest, I was surprised myself. So she said, my interest is to arrange furniture in the house. So very curious. So I myself asked her when we were doing a model interview, what do you mean by that? Every day you arrange furniture in your room, or once a week, or what exactly do you mean? She says, sir, I'm an interior decorator, but I didn't want to say interior decoration on my hobby, because then they'll ask me who is the best interior decorator in the world. Have you heard of this fashion designer, etc., etc. They didn't want that question. She wanted only a question relating to the principles of interior decoration. And therefore, she wrote, and she got into the service. I don't know whether they asked her about her hobby. So be specific and don't be very general. And if that happens, you may get interesting questions of the kind that you want. And so that is another precaution that you need to take.
Okay, sir. Next question. What to do when the student is not very good in any Indian language or literature paper? Like how to prepare?
No, literature paper you write in English, unless you take a language. Okay? Literature paper answers, suppose you take Malayalam literature, then of course you write in Malayalam. But I thought you were asking about Indian language, because there is an Indian language paper in the mains examination. 10th standard only. It's not English. It has to be your mother tongue or Hindi or any regional languages recognized in the constitution. And you need only about 30 marks to pass that, and it's only class 10 level. So anyone who has gone to high school in the mother tongue will do that. But there are some NRI students who find it very hard, because they may not know any Indian language, in which case there's a problem. But literature problem, that issue will not be there, because you will be doing that in the language of the literature that you are answering. So you will not choose Malayalam literature without knowing Malayalam. So that is not an issue. But for the compulsory paper, you need to have one local knowledge or Hindi in order to pass.
Okay, sir. Next question. Sir, in case of CDS exam, there is a misunderstanding that only if you have a army background, then only you can join the armed forces in the SSP interview. Is it true? As my father's friend who is in army also accepted this partiality.
Not at all. Of course, it is true that there are many families, particularly in Punjab, for example, who go father, son, everybody, and they always set aside one son for the army in a nationalistic way. So such things happen, but certainly there is no such restriction, and there's not even a preference. They don't say, as I said earlier, there may be a preference for an IAS officer's son or an IFS officer's son. But that's not very general. Similarly, Army, there is no such restrictions. In fact, they will want to diversify people from various sections of the public to make it a truly national army. So there will be no such discrimination.
In the personal interview, should we speak the truth
Yes.
during the interview because sometimes it gives a negative side of us?
Sorry, which side?
Negative side of us. Sometimes when we speak a truth, it will show the negative side of us. I mean, it may create a negative perspective on the interviewer.
No, you mean to say which is different from the government's point of view?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The question
You
is
are not supposed. You are not supposed to support the government. Suppose you are asked a question about language policy or the recent, just 2 days old education policy. You can oppose it directly. You can say that this is nonsense. No problem. But you should have reasons for it. You should be able to stick to it. You don't start by saying, I don't like this education policy without reading it. And then you will be caught and you will not be selected. But if you have read it carefully and you have a view which is different from what is said there, you must speak it out. And that is the role of the civil servant. Politicians may decide anything, but they finally, which is a decision before it becomes final, then you need to, you need to explain your position and tell them clearly why you think that, and stick to it. And they will not mind. They will move on to another question. So you are not supposed to toe the line of the government, and you must be honest and you must be convinced about it. Once you join the service, of course, different. Then you have to go by the government's policy. But before joining, you don't need to be, and you should not show too much enthusiasm on being faithful to the government's policy.
Sir, one question. What change you are observing in terms of aptitude or attitude regarding the civil service aspirants at your time and nowadays? What is the difference you are finding with the present civil service aspirants and the time when you are applying for civil service examination? Is there any generation gap or a big variation in the perspective and attitude towards civil service examination?
Sure. In fact, the first test, the preliminary test, is often referred to as the aptitude test. That is, they are trying to figure out sorry about that. So they would like to figure out from your answers whether you are suitable for the service, and that is aptitude. But making a choice is very obvious. But if you are bookworm, if you think that you want to spend all your time with books, and then don't opt for the civil service, because civil service takes you to the people. Whichever service you take, IAS more than any other, IPS in different circumstances, and foreign service also in different countries, different people that you have to deal with. So it is better to be an extrovert, someone who is interested in doing new things, find new ideas, grow up and learn and reform, change the world. That kind of attitude that you have, then you have the right attitude. But if you are not interested in general knowledge, if you are interested only in a particular subject, a doctor who specializes only in the nose, then somebody said, no, not all nose, the whole nose, but only one nostril. So that is the kind of specialization we have now. So if that is the kind of specialization that you are seeking, then the civil service is not for you. You must have very broad interests. And that we can, by discussing with your teachers and discussing with your parents and so on, you will be able to confirm what kind of attitude and aptitude that you have.
Next question, sir. Tell us about coaching. Is it necessary to take coaching or
Yes,
self-study is sufficient?
Yes, I already mentioned that. I had no coaching because there was no such thing at that time. No, now of course it is an industry. In Thiruvananthapuram alone, we have something like 30 coaching centers. So they're chasing you all the time. Come and study here. So that becomes a persuasion. But as I said earlier, if you are doing, say, particularly because if you are not doing your master's before you take the examination, you need some guidance to prepare. And so you don't have to go to a coaching class till you make it. You go for 1 year. Even if you have to take a second chance, then you don't have to go back. You'll be able to prepare yourself. And plus the material on the internet. Everything is available on the internet. If you want to write an essay, just go and search the essay and it is there. And there are hundreds of institutions which immediately post reply, answers, etc. Like, for example, when I write an editorial, open article in the Hindu, I find there are many academies, institutions. They turn it into a lesson and show it on their website within 10 minutes or 15 minutes after the article appears. I was quite surprised. Even before I see my own article, because the Hindu comes out maybe about 3 o'clock in the morning or something, and they watch for it. And so the idea is to spoon feed the candidate. Before he reads the article, he has a summary, and probably in Hindi or Tamil or whatever. So that kind of interest and attention these coaching institutes do. In a way, it is harmful because they are spoon feeding you all the time. On the other hand, if you don't have time to read the whole newspaper, they are showing you, yes, there is an article which is worthwhile. So it will go either way. But if you are confident, there is no need, particularly now, because everything is available on the net. It's a matter of your own choice. If you are not doing any other job, and if you are full-time available, why not go and spend 3-4 hours in an academy? And then most of these academies now are test-based. Like our academy, we have tests at the end of every week. And so you know how much you are progressing when you answer those. And therefore, you know what progress you are making or what progress you are not making. So these are the kind of advantages that you have in going to a coaching institute.
So there is one more question, sir. Is
Yes.
1 year of hardcore preparation enough to crack the civil service examination, or do we need to prepare along with the engineering? And when we are pursuing engineering, do we need to start preparing for civil services?
Yes, it's always good. As I said, if you start at the age of 12, that you have this, or 10 or 15 or 20, you have this interest, then that you find the time to do that in addition to what you're doing. Because even if you are able to read a newspaper thoroughly, even when you are doing a master's in engineering or medicine, that will suffice, because that is what you need. The general information that you don't have, you have to build up. And therefore, simultaneously, even as we are doing something else, keep an eye on this. Keep an eye on your notebook, what you are able to get into that. And that will be very helpful. And therefore, as I said, it is never too early to start. Now, of course, a new phenomenon which has come about because of COVID-19 is that most of these coaching classes are online. I don't know how long this will continue. We have started online courses in the hope that soon it will all be back to normal. But nobody knows. WHO does not know how many years this will last. They do not know what other mutations the coronavirus will take. So the humanity is on the verge of extinction. You never know. It can happen that the whole world will be destroyed. So in a situation like that, you cannot plan for the future anymore, not like the old days. So you need to learn as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And therefore, everybody has started online courses. Now we have started an online course for the whole world. In fact, we have a webinar we are giving on the 7th of August, 11 o'clock our time, which is called Passage to Indian Civil Service. This is basically meant for Indian students abroad. But students in India can also listen to that and learn something out of it. But it's the basics, for example. Then another thing that I forgot to mention was the reading of your NCERT textbooks. Many of you may be familiar with this. Because what happens is the NCERT textbooks, which you studied in school and have forgotten, have basic information on many things: science, arts, literature, medicine, everything. So it is good, worthwhile to get hold of the NCERT textbooks from, say, class 8 onwards. You must have forgotten all that, but you can refresh your memory, and therefore that is one compulsory reading for beginners. Please remember that.
So, in case if they are not able to prepare during engineering service, if they dedicate 1 year of their life into preparation of civil
Yes.
service examination, will that be sufficient to crack the civil service
So I
examination?
know many people who have done it in 1 year, but it's becoming more and more difficult because of the prelims examination is very tough, and that is something which it is a real obstacle or a hazard, because you cannot predict what questions will come, and therefore a lot of people lose out in the prelims itself. Then you have to wait a whole year to take the next prelim. So at that time, then you can study. So at least 2 years you should set apart. Psychologically, you must say, okay, the next 2 years, whatever may happen, I will prepare for the civil service. And not leave it, because in the middle of it, you will find it becomes very hard. You will have so much to read and so little time. And then many people leave. But don't do that, because this is manageable. And you don't need to be studying, 24 hours a day in order to prepare for this. It is a managing of a strategy. And that is another thing that guides can give you. What kind of time you should spend on what subject. Many people spend too much time on the optional paper, but that is only 2 papers. While general studies, you have 4 papers. And if you have an essay, then you have 1 paper, but you can score more marks. So all these techniques, the tricks of the trade, you can learn from those who are experienced. And as a result, some new development has taken place. That is, candidates who have failed in the examination are the teachers these days. If you go to any academy, you will find there are teachers who have done this examination 5 times and did not make, and they are the best teachers because they know where the mistakes were. And therefore, they are in great demand. In fact, my academy, the candidates requested us or demanded that we should get teachers who have failed the examination. They are not interested in those who passed the examination. So that is another, and it is justified in the sense that they have learned in the hard way what they should not be doing, what you should not be doing. From their experience, they are telling you, and that might be helpful to you.
One more question, sir. Should
Yes?
Ishika Naveen, she is asking, should I preferably choose IFS or IAS according to you, sir?
Well, I am an IFS evangelist. You know what an evangelist is. The evangelist will tell you that the only way to God is through him, right? And he knows who is God. So, because I had this experience of 37 years in the foreign service, I know what it is. But I did not know when I took the examination. I had no idea what my job was. I read some autobiographies of KPS Menon or some others, etc., some idea, but I never knew what it was all about. I never knew what the advantages were. I did not know what the difficulties were. So now, having gone through all that and then knowing a little bit about other services, I personally think and I am convinced that this is the best service possible for a young person. If you are energetic, if you are enthusiastic, if you are inquisitive, you want to travel the world, you want to move in very high companies of princes and kings and prime ministers, nothing like the foreign service. The opportunities are immense. And the knowledge you acquire of languages, of cultures, of educational systems, unbelievable. And therefore, I think foreign service is good, but it again depends on your aptitude and attitude. But you should not reject the foreign service because you don't know the information. Like many people don't know how to live in New York with Indian salary, right? They will say, oh, how do I live in New York? I lived in New York for 10 years, but I didn't live on Indian salary. You get an allowance to suit the place. And you get so many advantages. Your housing is free, your furniture is free, your newspaper is free, your phone calls are free, your car is free. What do you need money for? So foreign service, you have get so many perks, and even eating at home. You eat at home only once a week, because 6 days a week you are eating in somebody else's home. So you don't even money for eating. And I mean, I'm just exaggerating, but the opportunities are so many, whatever your interests are. And people cultivate you, of course, not the illegal way, but getting to know you, and they would like to learn from you. If you are a China expert, everybody would want to know what's happening between India and China. So this kind of demands there are, and those demands are an opportunity. So in the IAS, of course, you have much more power, but there is no power in the IFS because you are not working in your own country. Here, the power is with the IAS and the IPS because they are the ones who are running the country on behalf of the President of India. So they have all the power in their pen. And also, therefore, there is an opportunity for corruption, which is also a major problem in our system. So if you are not corrupt, foreign service is good. If you are corrupt, foreign service is not so good because nobody offers you a bribe in the foreign service. Anyway, we should not discuss that because I don't think you should ever think of that. A few years ago, nobody would consider an IAS officer corrupt. But these days, people suspect that everybody is. Unfortunate. But that is because of all these cases coming up of people doing various illegal things. But foreign service, there is no opportunity because you have no power. The opportunities are in IAS and in the police and in the income tax and various things. So you have to make up your mind, what are you looking for? If you are looking for an adventurous, an ambitious career, then the foreign service is very good. Then the question arises about families. Some people say it is better in the foreign service if you don't have parents and children. So, because you need to devote so much time to your parents and to your children, and that may come in your way. But there are so many opportunities. You can come home. There are emergency passages. You can travel. It is very free. You can bring parents to your posting. Where medical charges are met by the government. Children's education is free. You can send them to any school you want. There are so many advantages. And therefore, creature comforts, you should not worry. But if you want to sit in Trivandrum the whole of your life, from one department to the other, well, good to be here. Then you know everybody, you know everything. When I came back after 37 years to Trivandrum, I didn't know anybody here. It took me 14 to 15 years to get to know the politics of Trivandrum. So these are the comparable information. And you have to digest that information and then make a choice.
Okay, sir. One of the participants, she is interested in calligraphy.
Yes.
Can she include this in the hobby list?
Which one?
Calligraphy.
Calligraph, yes, of course. If you know everything about it, who is the biggest calligrapher, and they may even give you a pen and paper and say, please write, please draw. So such things have happened. People who have said we are painters, they would give you a pencil and paper and say, please draw a mouse or something like that. So that may happen. So you can certainly give calligraphy as a hobby if you are good at it.
I don't know, one funny question is there here. Does IAS officer has power to suspend the politicians?
What is it? IAS what?
Does IAS officer has the power to suspend the politicians?
Suspend?
I mean, that's what is a...
No, suspend means if he has committed a crime, yes. Maybe what she means is different. The relationship between politicians and the civil servants. Is that probably what she means?
Yeah,
Suspension,
I think so.
suppose you are a magistrate or a collector and a politician has done something wrong. You can suspend him, you can punish him. Whatever you want to do, you can do. But that is probably not the issue. The issue is the relationship with the ministers. Because ministers are the final decision makers. You can only advise them. And therefore, you have to have an understanding with the politician. But you should not be afraid of the politicians. You should not be afraid that he will transfer you out. In fact, that is the only thing they can do to you. Because once you are in the civil service, unless you commit a huge crime, see, somebody is asking me to look at the feedback link. How do I do that? I press something here.
No, sir. No, sir. It is for the participants.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So what I was saying was that you need to have a good relationship with the politicians, but give them your frank advice. Don't advise him either to suit his political party or his if he is corrupt, his corrupt practices, but honestly tell them the truth. And then if he takes a decision otherwise, ask him to write on the file. Say that he doesn't agree with the collector or he doesn't agree with the secretary. And then his decision prevails, then he faces the music. You would have said in the file that this is not the way to do it. And then you should not be afraid at all, because once you're joining the civil service, only the UPSC can remove you. Nobody, no politician, no chief minister, no prime minister can remove you from the service. He can transfer you somewhere where there is no school for your children or no hobby for your wife. Miserable for you, but nothing more than that. So be brave. Mr. Babu Paul, one of our distinguished civil servants, he used to say, remember that your chair is not more important than you. You know what I mean? When you are in a position, don't think that, oh, this is the best position in the world and the vice chancellor of this university. So I need to keep this for 5 years. And therefore you take all the decisions. No, that chair is not more valuable than you. So be firm about what you do. If you lose the chair, let it go. You will get another chair.
Sir, in the last few years, many of the IAS officers, like few,
Yes.
not many, few have resigned because of the political pressure. They are not able to do what they really want to do. So,
Yes.
is it the political people or the politicians are having such a high pressure on the IAS officer, or our IAS officers are not capable to withstand or resist those pressures, or they cannot go in the flow with the present politicians?
No, there will be no pressure as long as you get a reputation that you are fair, you are upright, you are not corrupt. There will be no pressure. They will tell you this is what I would like to do, and you tell them you don't do it, and then they may transfer you from tax department to stationery department. That's all. What is there to be afraid of? So there is no need to be pressurized by the politicians. But if you join the politician for any benefit for yourself, and then you had it, then you are trapped. Suppose you tell him that after this I want to be collector of Kasaragod or something like that. And then all the time you are thinking about that. Whatever the minister asks you to do about anything else, you will do because you want your Kasaragod. So that is the bad thing for the civil servants to do. You should be able to get a job which is worth doing and which is within your capability, and you also are doing it fairly and straightforward manner. Then nothing to fear about politicians. Because in the foreign service, we don't come very close to the politicians because we are far away. They come on visits and they are very nice to us because we have to help them with. Even the Prime Minister, when he comes abroad, he is very pleasant because he has more time with you. In Delhi, you cannot talk to the Prime Minister, can you? But if Prime Minister comes to New York and if I am the ambassador there, he has to talk to me. So that kind of relationship that you have with the politicians. I knew Mr. Modi when he came to New York as an ordinary politician. But I looked after him well because I was impressed with him. Nobody had thought of him as a Prime Minister. He was not even an MLA in Gujarat. But I could see that this man is something special. And I treated him as politely as I always do with others. And I was astonished when he one day became Prime Minister. I never went and told him, look, you came to New York and I gave you a lunch or something like that. I never claimed that. But that kind of experience you have. So politicians can be handled.
Sir, what is the maximum age limit for different categories such as GM, OBC, and SC/ST as per the new rule?
Well, I think for SC/ST it is almost limitless. I think more than five. I think it is no limit uh, on the chances you can take. General category only five, but others have more chances, and therefore there is no age restriction. But that is not very good thing to do, because what is the point of spending so many years and joining at a late age? Because for promotion there is no reservation. Promotion, you are in the normal track. You don't get any advantage. So it's only at the time of joining you have this advantage. And therefore, of course, you can make use of that advantage, nothing like it. But try to do it without it. Even if you are a special category person, you can be selected on the general list. Why not? And many people get selected. So, but if you have to fall back on a reservation, use it. Now, for example, here we have several IAS officers who come to Kerala. If they were coming here, if you're a general category, you cannot get a chance here unless you are the top most. So that's an advantage that they have, and that should be used to come to your own state, because it's not easy to come to your own state. So those advantages should be used, but that should not be an excuse. Wait for it. I have now 6 more chances, so I don't do well now. That kind of mentality you should not develop.
So last question of the session. Suppose because of the financial commitment, you told ideal age to start for the preparation is 21. When you are 21, we can start preparing for it. But some people will be having...
Taking the exam, not preparing.
Okay, taking the exam.
First chance you can do after 21. Preparing you must start when you are born. That's my theory. Yes, okay. Go ahead.
Because of some financial commitments, the people will not be able to focus immediately after they finish engineering. So sometimes, sometime they may require to settle down. So if they start at the age of 24 or 25, do you think it is late?
No, but what financial commitment do you have unless you have debts from before? For this examination, there is no financial commitment unless you join an academy, etc., etc. But you can prepare even without any financial commitment. And also, if you want to work for some time before you take the exam, there are opportunities now. We didn't have those opportunities because we had to take it between 21 and 23. While now, since it is 32, you don't need to take it in 21. You work for 2 years, make some money and pay off the debts of your parents, and then take the civil service. It's possible.
Okay, sir. If there are any more questions, we will mail it to you. So we are at the end of the session.
You still have time. You still have time, another 20 minutes or so.
Okay.
But it's all right. We can finish unless there are questions.
Okay. I will over it to Sangeeta ma'am. Okay. Sangeeta ma'am, you can take over the session.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. I think it was very informative. I have been also working with students for past 6 years, and civil services, we recently started promoting it more. But I could get a lot of information from you, sir, today on, various things that people can really look at. I hope people in the participant there have made note of things that has been shared. And we would love to see, many more people apply for this and take it on from here. My age is gone, so probably I will not be able to attempt this or prepare for it. But I'm sure I will at least put it across to the student community to definitely look at it and take it as one of the options where they get to serve the country as well. We have our HOD, the head of the Department of Civil Engineering, Mr. Igneshwaran here, Dr. Igneshwaran. Sir, if you could speak few words, it will be of great help if you can just take on the floor for a few minutes.
Okay, sure.
I express my gratitude for accepting our invitation and for delivering very useful information about the scope and preparedness required for civil service examination. Thank you, sir. I need a suggestion from you. I need a suggestion from you, sir.
Yes.
You mentioned about lack of language skill.
Yes.
engineering graduates. Also, language skill is the one of the basic requirement in all
Yes.
aspects. What changes you suggest in the present policy to improve this? Is it university has to change add the syllabus compulsorily in engineering education, the English language, something? What do you suggest?
Yeah, the problem, I don't know about Karnataka. In Kerala, the problem is that even though teaching, higher education, that is college level teaching, is supposedly in English. But because in the school level they don't learn much English, the teachers find it more convenient to explain things to them in Malayalam. As a result, the students expect everybody to speak in Malayalam in class. Even Shakespeare is being taught in class. Disaster. So where do you pick up your English? So the first thing is to make sure that the teaching is in English medium in colleges at least, if not in schools. According to the new education policy, up to class 5, everything should be in the mother tongue. But they say at the same time that if you want to switch to English even before 5, you have no objection to that. But at least in college, civil service examination and so on, which people who want to take that, they should have an opportunity to speak and write and read in English. You can write in your mother tongue, the examination. But as I explained, that's not very easy because non-availability of material. But, and also, suppose you join the foreign service by writing your examination in Hindi. There are some people like that. Then what do you do with them? If you don't know Hindi, and how do you post them to a country where Hindi is not spoken? In most countries, Hindi is not spoken. So we have to send them to an English school. After getting into the foreign service, they go to an English school and study for 2 years. And even those 2 years will not be enough for you to negotiate. If you are negotiating in the UN, you have real language experts there. Every word matters. So I even suggested to the government of India that please, for those who take the examination in Hindi, don't take them into the foreign service. Take them into IAS and send them to the state where they can speak their language. But then they said that will be discrimination. Then my answer was, then why don't you appoint me as a doctor? Then they say, you are not qualified to be a doctor. And say, no, that is discrimination. I should be given the same job. So that is stupid. But that's what we are doing. So where language skills are necessary, you need language skills. In the foreign service, other than English, you have to learn one language compulsorily. I learned Japanese. 2 years I spent in Tokyo learning the language from the university. And the government paid for all that. And I didn't have to do any other work except learning the language. So language skills are very important and must be developed. And that is why I keep telling our education policy experts that English should be given. Because English is not a foreign language. Don't say that we are patriotic and so English is. But our English is our English. We don't speak the Queen's English. We speak our own English or Manglish or whatever. But you need that. And so language skills are very important at one stage or the other. And if you get in without that, then you have to acquire it after joining the service.
Okay. Sir, I found one question in the chat box.
Yes.
How can I prepare for civil services along with engineering? That is, I don't know. You answered or
Prepare for what? Sorry.
Prepare for civil services along with engineering. How can I prepare for civil service?
Yes, I explained that.
Okay.
Whatever you are studying, with that you have to start. Because you cannot wait till you become 21 and then start the preparation. Right?
Right. Okay.
So start basic reading. Those are all the first steps I mentioned. Read a newspaper thoroughly. Listen to English news. Watch English movies. Listen to TED Talks. There are so many things you can do together with your education. And once you are confident about your results, then you move on to other things and prepare for your optional paper, etc. All that you may not be able to do together with your engineering education. So, but whatever general things can do, basically keep your eyes and ears open. Don't say I'm going to be an engineer, so I won't listen to politics or foreign affairs or sports. So all that you can cultivate. See, I keep telling my students that whatever you did from the date of your birth to the age of 21, whatever you have done will come into play in this examination. You know, what you played, what games you played, what you read, what you answered in class. All this will come unconsciously, that becomes part of your personality. And that is what is important.
Okay, sir. An interview candidate, and the last question, a candidate, he will get any more weightage having multi-language skills. He know Japanese, he know French, like that, sir. In the interview, how it will be, any advantages for the candidate?
No, they don't expect
Multi-language
you
skills.
to know any other language
Oh.
before you join.
Uh-huh.
Because foreign service has a language program as soon as you join. So you don't have to waste your time studying other languages. If you happen to know it, you can say to the board that, you know, I know Japanese, and they may give you a 1 mark more or something like that. But don't waste your time and money learning languages. The government will decide what language you should learn, and then they'll teach you. They decided that I should learn Japanese, so they sent me to Japan. 2 years, I did nothing but learning Japanese. So that's a program they have. So you don't have to worry. If you know the language, there's no harm. But it's not necessary to know another language.
Okay, thank you, sir. I forward to Sangeeta, ma'am.
Sure, sir. Thank you for your questions and the discussion that you had. We come to the end of this session, and I wish to place on record my great, sincere thanks to you, Mr. Sreenivasan, for accepting our invite and agreeing to be on this panel today. Thank you so much, sir. You were so insightful. I have taken away a lot of things from this session, and I'm sure many participants also would have. And from my side, I would definitely promise you to promote this, sir, because I want to see more and more people who take up these civil services other than the regular jobs that they really look for. One of the biggest
Sure.
areas that people can really take on to, and they should be looking at these form of jobs as well. I wish to place on record my thanks to the head of the department, Mr. Ignishwaran, Ms. Pranamaya from the Department of Civil Engineering, Ragesh Raju sir for helping us host this event, and last but not the least, all you dear participants who are with us, and I hope you've made the most out of this session. The feedback link is posted in the chat box. Please key in the feedback information there, and your e-certificate will be issued in 1 or 2 days. Post we receive this, it will be given to people who key in the feedback. So please ensure to put in your feedback in the link there. Thank you so much, sir. We end the session
Okay.
here.
Please give my contacts to anyone who may be interested in contacting me after this.
Sure, sir. Sure.
As I said, I'm an evangelist. I'm always available. Okay.
Sure, sir.
My
Definitely.
phone number, Twitter or Facebook, anything people can handle, contact me. Okay.
Yes.
Thank
Definitely.
you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I will end the event, sir, now.
Okay, 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 okay.